"No, stop it," she finally said. "You've got to go to work." "Later, then," he whispered into her ear. "Promises, promises," was her sleepy reply as she pulled the heavy blankets back over her shoulder as he drew away, turned, and put his feet on the still icy floor. He fumbled in the dark for his slippers, put them on, picked up his heavy bathrobe from the corner of the bed, and trekked out to the living room. The fire was still going. He opened the glass doors, fed in several more logs, closed the doors after opening the flue wider, then went into the kitchen, turning on the battery-powered lamp he had rigged up to the kitchen chandelier. For southern Missouri in December, it was damn cold, well below freezing outside, frost glistening on the deck railings and on the cover of the hot tub, which they had shut down and drained 3 weeks earlier when the problems had started. Always efficient and thinking ahead, Darla had set out the night before a 2-pound can of coffee and an old-fashioned percolator that had been stored in what they called their prepper stash down in the basement. Filling up the pot with water, Darren now spooned coffee into the basket to be placed at the top of the percolator, put the lid on, and turned on the kitchen stove. At least that still worked because it was propane. They used to have a tank topped off with 500 gallons of the stuff, but in the weeks after power had gone on the blink, they had been far too profligate in burning it up with their home generator to power and heat their 4,000-square-foot house, figuring the grid would be back up soon enough. Once things got back to normal, they'd just order up a propane truck to come out and fill them back up again. But things had not come back to normal, and they realized they might be in for a long haul with a cold winter, and the 50 gallons left should be hoarded only for cooking. The wood stove could provide sufficient heat for the living room and kitchen area, and at least they could cook indoors, unlike more than a few neighbors who on cold evenings stood shivering outside, cooking on their barbecues. In the last few days, Darla had even passed out 9 buckets of freeze-dried food from their emergency supply to neighbors who were coming up short, each bucket with enough food to keep a family of 4 going for a month. They had always factored in a thought regarding their neighbors and friends in a time of crisis. That was just part of their nature. But they could only give out a few more 1-month buckets of food before having to think about their own long-term needs. Surely, though, they both hoped the damage to the power grid and overall infrastructure of the region from the solar storm of 3 weeks past would be repaired and life would soon return to some semblance of normalcy. Neither of them wanted to think about the grim mathematics of what might happen to their emergency food supply if things still were not repaired a couple of months from now, especially given the reports, starting yesterday, that another solar event might be brewing. The water in the coffee pot heated up, and there was the first hissing pop as it began percolating. Darren loved the sound of it. It reminded him of his grandmother's home, a small farmstead, as if from another age, up in the back hills of the Ozarks. The soothing, nostalgia-inducing sound from the coffee pot grew louder, the dark brew splashing up against the small, clear glass globe atop the pot. When he spent weekends at his grandparents' house, Darren always got the job of watching the pot until the coffee was jet black, and they would then let him have a few warming sips, heavily laced with fresh cream from their cow tethered in the barn. The advent of the Mr. Coffee machines and then the little K-cups had, in nearly all homes, resulted in relegating a percolator coffee pot to the basement or the trash pile. Buying one for use in an emergency had been one of many smart moves that were now paying off. And besides, he loved the sound of it. And somehow, maybe it was just psychosomatic, the coffee did seem to taste better. He went back into the living room, taking in the vista offered by the 2-story-high glass windows of their home. Their house, a log cabin of contemporary design, was situated atop a high ridge rising nearly 200 feet above the lake of the Ozarks. It faced southeast, and at this time of year provided a perfect viewing point for the sunrise, which was beginning to unfold, the deeper indigos giving way to scarlet, and brilliant shades of pink. Darla shuffled out, bundled up in her oversized, rather funny-looking camouflage-patterned bathrobe with matching slippers, a Christmas present from him last year, went into the kitchen, pulled down